So when you look at products, the most important thing that you look at is what is the air permeance. You're not going to insulate your house with Swiss cheese, or you're not going to put golf balls in the attic.
Welcome to this edition of the Whole Truth Podcast. Today, pretty interesting guest, a friend that done some work for us, Randy with Superior Insulation. I'm going to just let you talk.
Randy with Superior Insulators.
I always think of you as the insulation guy, so that's why.
The way you ought to think.
But go ahead, tell us a little bit about yourself, kind of your journey as a business owner, and then we're just going to dive into some questions about spray foam insulation.
Well, very good. I'm not your typical person in insulation by any means. I've been in business 46 years. Yes, I'm 35. But I started out in health and wellness for 30 years. I had 5 companies, 150 employees. Everything was health and wellness, physical therapy. I created and operated wellness facilities and programs for hospitals. I covered 19,000 lives doing HRAs and so forth with General Motors, Lilly, municipalities, unions. Anything that had value to a person as to how they performed and their wellness is what I did. I got started in this spray foam 25 years ago. Not because I wanted to. I had so many facilities from 30,000 to 300,000 square feet that I had to make them more energy efficient. And the government was jumping in to give you some bonuses to do that. What I found was the buildings were so leaky, I could put new equipment in, but the equipment was like taking care of a box of Swiss cheese. You couldn't hold the heat, cold, whatever. And energy costs to me were huge. Not only the energy cost, but the moisture involved with it. So I found that foam was what I really needed to really tighten up the buildings. However, being in wellness, dealing with people with all kinds of maladies in hospitals and so forth, I couldn't use traditional products that had off gases, chemical sensitivities. So I found one product that was 100% water blown, no off gases, no chemical sensitivity. And I said, this is it. Well, you can't just take people's words for it. You need to get to the true people. So I actually went to the company in Mississauga, Canada, met with all of the engineers and chemists for them to prove to me that that was true. I was so excited. Then the CEO of the company came out and introduced himself and asked me to his office. Thought it was a little different. And as we're sitting there, he's interviewing me. And I said, why are you asking me all of these questions? And he said, well, Randy, you're from Indiana, right? I said, yeah. He said, we're a global company, but we don't do work in Indiana. I said, what? He said, Indiana has their own energy code, which is true. The national energy code we have is utilized by 49 states. One dumbs it down. So there was no need for people to understand what insulation really was, and nobody really dealt with it. So you brought me all the way up here to see all of this, and now you're telling me I can't have it? And he said, I've learned enough about you that you can. I said, great, thank you. So what are you going to do? He said, no, you're going to be our dealer in Indiana. I said, no, I'm in health and wellness, not insulation. And he said, well, thank you. We're in health and wellness as well, because when you look at making a building or a house healthier, which can only be done if you take care of a lot of things, which typically can't be done unless you lower your air changes per hour so that you have your own air inside that you can control. So that's why I do this. When we started out in Indiana, Everybody thought it was something from outer space. I've been at the Indianapolis Home Show now all of these years, and it's pure education. And that's what I do most of the time now, is educating architects and engineers, especially MIT engineers. They're so smart, they just need some connections. So there's many things that are so simple, but they're so difficult because people have never looked at that. For instance, let me ask you a question. R value is more better?
Well, yes, but the answer must be no, because you're asking me that. But I guess the average person says, maybe the uneducated person says yes. Maybe that's the best way to put it.
R value, more R values better. Is that correct?
Yes.
That's what we're always told. And in every fall, you've got the energy companies on the television saying you need to put more R value, more insulation in your attic. Why? Well, because it makes it your fault, not their fault, that the energy costs are going up or whatever. When you're looking at insulation, R value is a laboratory term. You put a material in a box, you close it up, you have heat at one end, you measure how long it takes to get to the end in a sealed environment. The longer it takes, the better the R value. You take the top off, and all hell breaks loose because there's nothing to stop it. And that's what happens in the true environment. R value, when you say is more better, there's diminishing marginal returns. So when you look at insulation, when you start putting it in, you have great value. But as you put more in, it drops. So, for instance, our energy code changed from R13 in walls to R19, 40% more. What's the value of that extra 40%? 2%. So you pay 40% more for a 2% value. And all products are standardized, which has no sense, but you also have to understand codes are not put together by engineers. They're done by laymen. And oftentimes there's companies behind them to make sure that they say the right things. The most important thing is that your house be tight and ventilate right. So many times, no, you can't have too tight a house. You're going to have mold and what have you. No, the house or any commercial building has to be tight, but you have to ventilate right, which does not mean that you just bring a bunch of air in with an exhaust fan or whatever. You bring in what you take out. You know what the humidity is so that you have your own working environment. When you look at insulation.
Okay, let's go back to the R value.
Okay.
So you showed that graph at the beginning that it's really beneficial, I guess is how I read that. Then
Right.
it pretty much drops to nothing.
Correct.
So where is that line when we were talking about insulation in an attic or insulation in a wall?
That's perfect because there are key points. And this is Fourier's law of thermodynamics. So you have two marks. In the walls, an R13 has your greatest benefit, and then it levels off to 19. In an attic roof or ceiling, you have all of this pressure going up. The first mark that you have of value is R20, but our code in Indiana is R38. The other 49 states is R49. But what's the value? Well, the difference between R20 and R38 is 40% or 100% more cost at the last 2% of conductive heat flow reduction you can get. So what's the difference between R38 and R60? Zero. They're the same. diminishing marginal returns. The more you put in, the less you get. You get to that point where it's just crazy. But the most important is not R value, because that's not a real term. R value is only one item. It's only measuring conduction. It's just conduction. What you feel the wall, oh, the wall's cold. How warm can it be? Well, that's not real important. You also have convection. As the heat goes up, it goes to the ceiling, and you've got all this insulation up there. Conduction with R value doesn't measure that.
Okay.
So you have to look at the product to know what its air permeance of. Does it allow the air to go through or not? And then the last one's radiation. R value doesn't measure that either. So when you look at products, the most important thing that you look at is what is the air permeance. You're not going to insulate your house with Swiss cheese, or you're not going to put golf balls in the attic. So air permeance. Cellulose is top of the scale. It has an air permeance of 50 to 70 liters per meter second squared.
So cellulose is really what old blown insulation, or do they still make it new?
They still make it.
Okay.
It's still the big item, especially with new houses.
Okay.
And why? Because it's
cheap.
the cheapest.
Yep.
It's also the worst. Fiberglass has an air permeance of 37. That's a lot better. And then you go down to mineral wool or the new timber bat. It's at 26.
What is timber bat?
Timber bat is a product from Europe. It's been over there for years. In the States, we use mineral wool. Well, in Europe, as we're seeing with our diet and so forth, there's a lot of things they don't allow for your health. Well, it's expected that the mineral wool is going to be the asbestos of the future.
Oh, wow.
Something you don't want to be around. So those are the three top. Where you want to be is an air barrier, meaning that air can't come through it. Either direction. You're going to hold my heat in here. It can't go out. So that is 0.04 liters per second meter squared compared to 50 to 70 or 37. Those products can't handle it. When you get down to spray foam, open cell foam is 0.0049, where closed cell is going to be even more. Once you get to the air barrier, you're home free. So looking at R value is a total misnomer. So when a house is completely done, there is an energy code. Indiana's the lax. But you do a blower door test to see how leaky the house is. And it's under pressure. So what is the air changes under 50 pounds of Pascal? So in Indiana, it's 0.5. If you go to the other 49 states, it's 0.3 or 3.0, 5.0. That tells you how tight your house is. There's many brand new houses that can't hit 5. Gorgeous houses, because they're not looked at correctly. They're not using good products. They're not sealing things. And our houses are typically under 1. So you have a 5,500 square foot house that you heat and cool for $150 a month. There's no drafts. The difference in temperature from the floor to the ceiling in a 2-story house is 1 degree. It's not 10 degrees. And it's not like, well, in the summertime, we don't use the upstairs because it's too hot.
Right.
So that's when we start looking at the value of product. And it all comes down to air permeance.
So open cell, closed cell. What is the difference there? Where do you use each of them in different applications?
Both products are a polyurethane, a glue.
Okay.
You have part A and part B. When they come together under pressure and under a ratio of 1-to-1. It can't be lopsided. It's got to be perfect, at a perfect temperature, pressure, and ratio. It creates bubbles. Close cell, 98% of those bubbles are intact, and they're very tight. Air cannot pass, and vapor cannot pass. Now, open cell has the same bubbles, except 95 to 98% of those bubbles burst. Air can still not go through, but vapor can. Hydrogen is a smaller molecule. But people say, but I don't want moisture in my house. Well, everything in life has a balance of moisture. So you want that to be able to escape. You don't want something that's going to absorb it and not be able to dry. So with open cell, whenever you're using wood, there's a good probability that someday, some way, and it's not just through bulk reactions of a leaky window or leaky roof, but you have diffusion where this wall has air go through it. So you want that to be able to dry passively. With closed cell, that's not going to allow that to happen. So you can do things perfect, but if moisture gets into it, oftentimes by the season that it can escape the same direction, it's been there too long, can be there too long, the wood absorbs it and it doesn't dry, then you run into challenges.
So you're saying if you're building a house or doing a remodel job, you want to use open cell on the walls. Is that correct?
On the walls and the roof deck or ceiling.
So now, where do you use closed cell insulation at?
Closed cell is an incredible product. It's incredibly good, or it's a total disaster. And what do I mean by that? If water gets into the wood and it can't dry, then it rots and you have huge challenges. Right. So we use tons of both. Not only that, but we actually manufacture it, the same company that got into it in Canada today. So if I'm doing a metal building, closed cell is great. It's going to stick really well.
So metal studs,
everything metal. Those are fine. Or we do a lot of heavy commercial.
Okay.
So if you see FedEx at the airport, we did all of that.
Okay.
There you got 1 million square feet. It's all sprayed. But in that situation, typically, and when you look at hospitals and CMU buildings, we'll spray on the outside. The first reason we do that is to stop moisture from coming in.
Okay.
Because moisture is what kills everything. And once you get moisture into the concrete or the block, it comes on through. The walls are cold. You put fiberglass on them on the inside. You get moisture. So you put it on the outside, and the first advantage is that there's no more moisture. But then the second thing is it's a great insulator. So you've got that all at one time. There's lots of people who still use foam in wood structures. They swear by it until you find a problem. And the problem's not a simple problem, because when you spray with closed cell, it's a very dense product and it glues everything together. So I've seen complete roof decks have to be cut off, rebuilt, and so forth. So it's not very forgiving. Open cell is very forgiving. But as Ruskin said, there's hardly anything in this world that some man cannot make a little worse and sell a little cheaper. And the person that considers price only is the man's lawful prey. There's all kinds of foams that are made by companies that are just jumping on the bandwagon. There's people who make it in their garages.
Right.
You need to know a reputable company, production, and even more than that, when you get into installing it, it's not a simple thing. The first important point is not pulling a trigger. It's making sure that the equipment is operating perfectly. And when I say perfectly, it's got to be the correct temperature, correct pressure, and also it has to be the same ratio all the time, not half of the time.
So, because when you're doing spray foam, you're combining two different, an A and a B together.
That is it.
Through the gun. Okay.
And if they're not correct, something's going to happen. With close-cell, I've seen close-cell turn to jelly in walls.
Wow.
And people go back, how'd this happen? Well, it was off ratio when it was sprayed, or it wasn't up to temperature when it was sprayed. And it's not an easy situation to fix. Open cell will show its face very quickly. If something's wrong, you're going to know. We take another step. All of our equipment is computer controlled that does printouts of everything, and it lets you know anytime that there's a challenge. So when we're done with a product, with a spray in, we actually have a full printout of everything that happened during that time. So you have to know that in order to, you're manufacturing a product in somebody's walls.
Right.
And the important part with insulation is you get one chance. Today, we see all kinds of houses that are 50, 75, 100 years old that they're redoing them. That's a very expensive process, quite valuable. But if you do it right the first time, it's there forever.
So kind of that question that we get a lot, being a roofing, really when we're talking insulation for us, it's mainly the roofing decks. So, and we had this conversation before we hit, record, but we started having a conversation like the manufacturers, the shingle manufacturers, some of them want to push back and not cover warranty. So, I've been taught as a roofer, your attic has to breathe, you want airflow, and then now it's, let's spray foam everything. So let's kind of talk, if a customer is considering spray foam in an attic, like what is the important things to consider, so we got open cell, closed cell. So we understand it's open cell because we got to let the moisture, we got to let that roof deck breathe.
Okay. Now I say that, but I've been around so many building failures. It's just like it punches you in the nose. You can use closed cell. You need to make sure you use the right thickness.
Okay.
You need to make sure that everything is sealed, because if you have a leak in your roof, and for some reason around 4th of July, right after 4th of July, you find a lot of holes in your roof. Well, not knowing that, and moisture gets in, it's not going to easily dry out. Okay. And again, we get into the closed cell capture. Well, let's go back to roofing. And people say that a roof has to be vented. You ask yourself why? Well, because it gets hot up there in the winter. There's so much thermal mass up there, it's going to be hot regardless. You're not venting for heat. And you can put power vents and everything else, but then you start to disrupt the flow of moisture out of an attic. And how does the moisture get in the attic?
By letting it in.
By letting it in. And how does it get in? Well, you put venting, but primarily the reason for venting, period, is because of the insulation that's used. When we're talking about cellulose, it has a high, very high air permeance. So in the winter, when it's 8 degrees outside today, and it's 72 degrees in here, or I think it's 67 in here right now, but what happens?
We need some insulation on this end of the building. It's colder in this end of the building. It's 70 in that end of the building.
Okay. Well, it's because of you. You're a cool cat. But what happens is, when we're talking about the air permeance, and when I was talking about the difference in temperature from the floor to the ceiling being 1 degree, in this one, there's about 8 degrees, because what happens is the heat goes up. You've got all this pressure, and it pushes right through the cellulose up there. Oh, it's probably fiberglass. And so as that goes up, you have a 70-degree temperature at a 45% relative humidity, it goes through that ceiling and it hits 8 degrees at very low relative humidity. So what happens is this moisture-laden 45% escalates to 100% relative humidity. And now you've got moisture up there. How do we get rid of it? Well, first of all, you got to get rid of the material and put in foam. But if you don't do that, you use vents to come in on the outside so that the air outside can take it out. But as it takes it out, it takes more of your heat out. So it's kind of a negative situation. So that's where the moisture comes from. If you're going to be spraying your attic floor, use foam. You can use closel in the attic's floor, but you put the foam down there, so the air can't go up. So you're maintaining this temperature in here instead of it just doing that. You don't even need the vents, but the vents are in there just as code. It has no bearing at all in the winter. In the summer, it has no bearing either. But when you're using the foam to spray on the actual roof deck, you have no venting at all.
Right.
Because now that attic space is another room to the house. Mm-hmm. But people say, I don't want to heat my attic. Well, you're not. It's latent air.
Right.
So in that situation, your relative humidity in the house is going to be 40 to 50, 30 to 50, something like that. And that's fine. But if you have 100% relatively in your house, it's going to be in your attic as well. So obviously that's not a situation. The important point is that when the roof deck is sprayed, it is consistent and consistent thickness. There's no air being brought into the outside, from the outside. But of course, the house itself, under code, has to have mechanical ventilation. So the best thing to do there is to use an ERV so that you're bringing in fresh air, excelling the same amount, but doing a crossover so it's preheated, pre-cooled. Did I answer any questions on those attic?
Yeah, I think so. So you said Indiana's weird and has their own, energy efficiency code. Like, explain a little bit of that, of like what is with the rest of the country compared to Indiana, and then do you have any reason? Do you know why that Indiana's like that?
Well, first of all, you always hear Indiana has affordable housing. It's cheaper to build, but you pay more on the back end. But then you also look, Indiana's not dumb, because when you look at the advent of changing from an R13 wall to an R19, from a 2x4 to a 2x6, that's some expense. But then to know that you're spending 40% more in insulation material, not including the 2x6, but you're only getting a 2% value, you go, why? Well, take it another step. Why would you put an insulation in a wall that air goes right through, when you could put something in that's going to be permanent? Fiberglass cellulose is good for 15 to 25 years, and then you basically have to open it up, take it out, what have you. So from that point, Indiana's not dumb. And when Indiana's being an R38 in the attic, but the other 49 states are R49, that difference between 38 and 49 has zero conductive heat flow reduction. So instead of looking at R value, go another step, and that is air permeance. That takes care of a lot of things. Planes don't put an R100 insulation on the outside. It's all about sealing up, but handling the inside temperature and so forth. Now, back when I was talking about being in health and wellness, that's what I am today, by doing things right. And your house or the place that you work ought to be healthy. And we're talking about quality of air and so forth. We get into mold. Again, all of that starts turning out into products that have high air permeance. So attics, our value is just a dumb term. It makes it simple because more's better. More's better.
Right.
But it's not. So you keep pushing in the wrong direction instead of making people smart. In other states where our ACH, air changes per hour, meaning how much leakage you have in your house, ours is 5, everybody else's is 3. The tighter it is, the better energy efficiency. And when you're talking about an environment, you have people who have chronic challenges with mold, mildew, asthma. A tight building is much healthier. So you're dealing with a lot of other issues than just out of your pocket. So Indiana's not in a bad place. We just need to do more education, and that's what I do most of my time.
So, so the product is still made in Canada, or do they have any manufacturing facilities?
There's manufacturing facilities everywhere.
Okay.
The original company that created the wonderful open cell and so forth, they sold out. The owners were in their 80s, global product, sold out to another company that wanted to make it cheaper. So they kept making it cheaper, which made it less valuable to handle all of these challenges. We went back to the chemist in Canada that did all of that and asked them before we could even finish the sentence. We now produce it ourselves in Canada, and then bring it down to the States.
So how many dealers carry your particular brand?
We have many.
Okay.
But our company, we have 18 rigs in Indiana, all the way from Indianapolis down to Louisville, Evansville, and we just do everything. Just like yourself. You know what's going on. You know your product. You know the proper way to install it. If somebody asks you to do something that you's not right, you're going to walk away after you've educated them. And that's the way we are. You get one chance, and you stick with that. And that's why I always appreciate when I get a phone call from you, I meet you, Nick, anybody else. I appreciate it because we keep our standards high.
So what is there, like 2 or 3 top things to ask if you are talking to an installation company? Like, of course, I want them to reach out to you guys, but some people may watch this somewhere else and be like, what are them, and I love your approach to selling, because that's how our entire sales system is set up for us. It's like, I want my guys to educate, our customer. Like, you don't have to understand roofing, like where they can go install it tomorrow, but I at least want them to know that when they looked at our quote and there's 14 things on our quote, and the other quote said new roof $12,000, like, okay, what are you getting for $12,000? We may be $14,000, but you're getting these 14 components, or 14 pieces to the puzzle. So
that's right. And it always bothers me when people say you're a salesman. No, I'm an educator.
Right.
And just like you, once you've educated your clients on what's important and what has to be done, well, what if I don't do this? Well, if you don't do this, I don't do this. Because it's those little parts. The devil's in the details. If you don't do those, you're skipping, and there's going to be challenges of some part. And if you have a challenge because of me, it's my fault, not yours. So education is everything. When we do quotes, before we insulate anything, everything's got to be tight. Because you may not think, if you have a couple 2x4s next to each other, that there's not going to be much air come through that. You do an entire house and you just go ahead and leave a window out.
Right.
Because that's what's occurring. So when you do it, you want it to be as perfect as possible. So we always explain, this is the process we take. This is what we take. Well, can I do that myself? You can do it yourself, but we're going to take a look at it afterwards. And if it doesn't meet, then we have to do it.
Right.
So it's better that you use people that do it every day, that understand those values. Just like you're not going to let somebody, oh, you go ahead and you take the shingles off, check all the sheathing. And
Right.
That's just not going to happen. So make sure that a person that is an insulator, it's not just because they have a rig that they bought on eBay. They have to have schooling. They have to be certified. In many places, you can't even buy product unless you show a certification. Some places don't care what you got. They just want to sell.
Right.
So you need to look for quality products, quality people. And, we've been in business 25 years. If somebody calls us from 25 years ago, we're going to go see them.
Right.
Usually it's not a problem of ours, but it's just what was seen. So we take care of our clients. You want to be able to call somebody and know they're going to be there tomorrow.
Right.
And we do heavy commercial also. When we do houses, it's third-party tested. You're guaranteed getting what we offer. When we're doing high-rises and so forth, we have engineers testing everything. So that's the way it ought to be, not chucking a truck.
So if, let's say somebody wants to re-insulate their attic, a remodel job, not new construction, do you recommend them spraying the roof deck, or do you recommend them spraying the attic floor?
That's totally dependent upon the house itself.
Okay.
Once you get to looking at it, if they have their air handlers up in the attic, or if they have their furnaces up in the attic, high efficiency, whatever, then you're going to be going to the roof deck, because you want that attic at a good temperature. And when you do the roof deck, and again, you're not actually heating, it's latent air, but the difference in temperature in the attic is going to be anywhere from 4 to 6, maybe 8 degrees. So on a day like today, if it's 8 degrees outside, but it's 70 in here, your attic would be 64. Not 8, 64. So if you have your air handler going through, that unit is compromised. And just think, if you have your air conditioning up in the attic, and it's going to be 140 degrees in the attic.
Right.
But if you keep your house at 72 in the summer, it may be 76, 78. So you're not fighting that. It's part of the envelope. So you really need to see what it is. If there's nothing going up there, if it's a traditional ranch, then the attic floor can be good. But if they also have a lot of electronics or lights and things like that, or sometimes people store things in their attic.
Yep.
You're not supposed to, but you know how it goes. We all speed, right? And so then in that situation, if you want to put grandma's Christmas tree up there, as my wife did with the fairy on top, got so hot that she melted down, that was the end of it. The roof deck got it, so that temperature is always good.
Nice.
You want something that's going to, firsthand, save you money, gives you comfort, lasts forever, and pays for itself. Done right, it's simple stupid.
Right.
It's just a bunch of bubbles.
What is there like main manufacturers in the spray foam world that are quality? I mean, like for instance, in shingles, there's kind of there's different qualities, but there's some that are just super cheap, and then there's just different, I mean, it's like in everything. I mean, I guess it's, if you're buying something made out of metal, like there's a different gauge,
Right.
You can buy a real thin metal, you can buy thicker metal. So,
Well, that's very, very important. And how does the layman know? Well, every product has an ESR report, or in Canada, there's another one where the product is given to a third party. They test all of that and they list all of the benefits, all of those ratios and so forth. The only challenge is they don't have to show the bad stuff. So you need to know what you're looking for. For instance, with open cell, people say, well, open cell is going to absorb water and what have you. It certainly can. There's products out there that certainly do. But when you look at the numbers, our product will hold no more than 5% moisture, which is nothing. You get that just through diffusion. Some companies may be 50 to 60%.
Wow.
That would be difficult, but it's out there. And again, it's usually a cheaper product, and people don't understand enough to take that risk, and it's a risk. So yes, there's good products and there's poor products. That's a difficult thing you really need to ask your insulator to go over their product with you so they can go through the reports. That's what you do with roofing, right? I don't know anything about roofing. I just know that I want a 35-year shingle that lasts for 70.
Right. So on that, we kind of had that discussion about the different manufacturers. So what is some of the points we discussed it on the
yes.
So is there certain manufacturers that their shingle's still covered? Like, because you educated me on a couple things that I hadn't even quite heard yet. So I guess kind of, and I don't care, you can talk manufacturer names, it's not going to hurt me, So is there certain ones that you feel are more favorable towards having a spray foam deck?
I don't want to get into that. I don't want to create any enemies.
Okay.
We only use our own products because we can stand behind them.
Okay.
If we are doing a project where the architect has already specified another product, we will still take ours and show them to see if they accept it. It's a difficult situation. But
so when you're dealing with architects, do you notice the same shingle that's spec'd on jobs or not? And you don't have to say the brand. I'm just, because I didn't know if that ever, if when an architect, and I'm not smart here, so we bid some stuff that's spec from architects, but I didn't know if maybe an architect, gets used to using this particular shingle, and then they know that this brand of spray foam will work and their warranties won't void or anything like that.
The challenges with architects, and things are changing drastically right now because of litigation, is that they do so much, but to know which products, whatever, they don't have that capacity or time to be able to do that. So they use a real cutting edge situation called cut and paste. And ironically, in most situations, when they're talking about spray foam, they talk about closed cell. It's just cut and paste, cut and paste. And then when I'm at a building failure with an architect and I say, so did you specify this insulation? Yes. What did you specify? I don't know. Well, why don't you know? So we don't know. We just cut and paste.
Right.
But the challenge today is the architects, because there's huge cost with mold and everything else, the litigation is going back to the architect because the architect's responsibility is to make sure people use things right and they do it right. Well, so now we're being called to go in and inspect these buildings. And then when we go back with our report, they're going, that's not the way I did it. Well,
right.
So I
literally just got a home inspection report back on a house I'm selling.
Yes.
And it has a metal roof. The entire thing is metal. And in the report, it says, due to, and it was snowy the day that they inspected it, due to bad weather condition, we could not get on the shingled roof. But that was copied and paste. Like, so as soon as you said that, I kind of laughed, because I mean, to me, like an architect, you think is like the details that combs through absolutely everything. So that's why I ask if there is, certain, because I will say a name brand, because I'm not putting you in that spot. Like 3 or 4 years ago, Certainteed was the only one that would still warranty their shingles if there was a spray foam deck. Now there's starting to be some conversation of other manufacturers warrantying it, but I've had conversations with other shingle manufacturers, and they've kind of admitted to me that if they could pin it back on the installation and get out of the warranty claim, they're going to, which let's just be honest, that's big manufacturer, that's big corporation. If they can lawyer up or point a finger over there, that's what a lot of people do. There's not a lot of people that are like you or me that when somebody calls and says, hey, we have a problem from 7 years ago, well, let's go look at it. Like, is it something that we did do? Is it something we didn't do? So, and I think you've kind of answered a lot of that with understanding, like, how do you making sure that the foam is consistent, and, open foam or open or closed cell, like as long as it's applied correctly. Like you can give 2 roofers the exact same material and one could install it better and it lasts longer because it was installed properly, or there was checks and balances. Like when we do a roof, there's checks and balances that we're doing on things to make sure, you've seen plenty of nightmare spray foam
with spray
situations.
Foam, there's another part that I didn't even touch about, and that's the substrate.
Yep.
What's the temperature of the substrate, and more importantly, what's the moisture content? Because if the moisture content's too high, it's not going to stick.
Okay.
So you have to, all of that comes into a system. And it used to be that if you called a roofer and said that my roof deck is sprayed with foam, that nope. It was in the whole roofing. Don't get on because you'll fall through. So there was a consortium put together by University of Florida. They got together what they found to be 50 roofs that had failed. And they went out and studied every one of them. And the challenge wasn't the foam, it was flashings. So you can't just point at what the symptoms are. You got to find out, how do we keep this from happening? And everybody takes a part in this.
Right.
So you got to do things right. And you need to go beyond that, because we all protect each other, because none of us want a building failure.
Right.
So it's a simple process, but it takes people that are professionals like you and your man. I come in here today and you're doing education. Who does education? Just get in the truck and go.
Right.
It's what separates
right. Absolutely.
us from people who are just chucking a truck.
Yep. Absolutely. No, as we wrap up, like one thing that I like to ask like business owners is like, share a failure that, is just kind of, they kind of laugh about. Like one guy I had in here said he made $1.3 million in like a couple weeks, and he lost $1.8 million like in half that time. So that was kind of funny, because people see all the trucks or hear that you have 16 crews or 18 crews, and it's like, oh my gosh, like you're so lucky and life must be so easy and you must have never had a problem. So just kind of maybe a funny failure or something like that.
Well, I'd like to jump in on that, but I've been doing this for 21 years, and I've never really had one of those. I've been to some because I'm the person people call to check things out, and it was quite obvious. One was a house that was 4 years old, and there had been a leak in the roof from day one, but it was sprayed with closed cell, so nothing was seen because all the moisture stayed all of the OSB all the way down. Then it made it into the walls. That's where Mom found it, because she had 2 young boys on the south end of the house. She would read to them at night. She kept finding mold on the wall. She'd cleaned it off with bleach. Not that that really works, but then she went through the wall and found black mold behind it. They had to leave the house, had to cut the entire roof off. The insurance company had called me to redo the roof with open cell instead of closed cell, which there wouldn't have been a problem. And they filed a $4 million lawsuit, never moved back into the house. Both boys had respiratory problems. Could have been done if it was open cell. If you have a single nail hole, the foam doesn't absorb it. It will go right through it. And you see a spot on your roof, on your ceiling, that's exactly where it's at. Another one was a 4-year-old house, high-end house with brick and stone on the outside. I get there, it's an engineer and an architect. And they said, let us show you. And so they took their pencil and they put it right through the rim joist. And it was rotten. And they said, who would do this? It was close cell. And when you look at the way Mother Nature works, she doesn't stop. You can't stop her. The whole bands in the house were rotten. $300,000 to repair it. If it would have been open cell, no problem. It's little things like that, because cut and paste, that's what we do.
Right.
I read this and it said we're supposed to use closed cell here. Okay, use closed cell. Now whose fault is it? Architect? The person who put it in? Whatever. So usually those dumb things are used because of overlooking something.
Have you ever heard of the book, The 4 Agreements?
No.
So the 4 agreements are be impeccable with your word, always do your best. All right, Adam, you got to help me out here because now I'm drawing a blank. Don't make assumptions and don't take anything personally. And then there's a 5th agreement that pretty much says don't, how do I say that? I'm going to totally mess it up now. I'm trying to pull this out on the spot, but like question everything. And it's funny because me and my wife work with a friend that a business coach, I guess you would call him. And he's like, you got to watch that, the 5th agreement when you go to with your team members, because like you want them questioning stuff, but then you don't want them questioning stuff all day where they get nothing done. But that's what I try to teach our guys. Like I want you to have ownership. Like if you know something isn't right here, and just because, and I love my sales guys and I try to train them as much as I can, as I was training one when you walked in here, they still sometimes don't totally understand all that. And they may say one thing when they really meant another thing. So I'm just like, guys, we just don't be afraid to, to question. So there's a lot of truth to that. And, in the contracting space, the good and the bad is there's a very small, barrier to entry. So like, and there's nothing wrong with a guy in a truck. That's how I started, however, I wanted to educate and do things right. And I look back and there's jobs the first couple years that I didn't do. We were talking about that earlier for the guy that introduced us. He called me out on a job. I didn't end up doing it because I didn't have the manpower to do it, but it built this relationship. But it was a job I was willing to say no to because I didn't really know what the heck was going on. So, yeah.
And one of those things is you have to be careful not to be literal.
Right.
Because, first of all, few people can read my writing. But sometimes, being left-handed, I get things kind of backwards. And so if you take things literal, you've always got that feeling in your gut that goes, Randy, I shouldn't do that. That something's not right here. Question that.
Yep.
And feel comfortable as your men do.
Yep.
I've heard guys call you before and go, Bob, what are you thinking here? And you go, I don't know. Yeah, you're right. I'm glad you brought that up. And so your men are educated and they're willing to call out something if it doesn't feel right to them. Never take that away from them.
Right.
And you don't. You guys are good.
So one more question before we wrap up. Can you, if you sprayed open foam on this wall and sprayed closed foam in there, can I tell that can a consumer tell that difference by the naked eye, or can you tell the difference?
I can tell some differences by knocking on the wall to feel the difference in densities. Closed cell is very dense. It has like typically twice the R value per inch, so you don't put in as much. So you may feel some things that are hollow. Open cell is much softer and it absorbs sound much better. So can do that. As far as which one works better, just like I showed, the difference in the air permeance is so far off the chart that nobody would ever know. I do have people say, though, that they really think that the closed cell is much better, even when they don't do all of the air sealing and everything, which is very important. So, but it's so subjective at such an nth degree. If you're paying a whole lot more, yeah, it feels better. But the difference between the cost of open cell and closed cell is 50% more. And when you're talking about the dollar's return and what kind of risk are you taking, I want to be as soft and comfortable as I possibly can.
So I'm saying, but if the wall's exposed, and can you tell the difference if a guy's spraying open and closed?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I'm just asking as a customer, if they are being sold, hey, they're spraying closed, can they walk in and be like, that's not what that doesn't look like closed to me.
First of all, put your finger in it.
Okay.
If your finger goes in it, it's open cell. If you put your finger in it and it hurts because it's not going anywhere, it's more dense, it's closed cell.
Perfect.
Then some other challenges and things that have changed is that the open cell typically was 100% water blown. So no off gases, no chemical sensitivity, all of that, which was my end of the world. Companies started putting in theirs that they were water blown, not 100% water blown. So in my book, you're either 100% pregnant or you're not. So that has become a challenge. But the closed cell was chemically blown, and it used to be that it may be 2 or 3 days before you can even enter. Things have been changed. We changed ours a long time ago before it's been mandated, but that's getting better as well. Ours is really the top of the line. Global warming potential. How long it takes to replace the ozone that was depleted by spraying. With closed cell, it used to be up to 600 years to replace what you just destroyed. Ours is 1.
Wow.
Which is the same thing as open cell being water blown. But it costs more.
Right.
It's healthier. So we just want to be out in front doing the very best that we can, doing the right thing for people, for their health, their families, and their pocketbook.
Yep.
It's simple to do.
Right.
So, I wish you would have put a metal roof on my house 35 years ago, because today, to redo that, it would have been since different.
Right.
Wow.
Yep.
I wish I would have known you 35, but you're probably not even born yet.
I was born. Probably wasn't making much sense when I was talking 35 years. So the other day, this is a complete side note, the other day I started realizing I'm the oldest guy in the company now. Jerry retired a month and a half ago on me, and so I started looking. I was like, wait a second. I asked the one guy that works for me in production, I'm like, how old are you? And he's like, 35. I'm like, dang it. I was like, I'm the old man now. So I just remember when I first started the business, I met one of my sales guys right around the corner from my old house on a job. And the guy got up. He's like, I got out of the truck. He's like, you're the owner, or your dad owns it? I was like, no, I own it. And now I've got plenty of gray hairs. So it's a benefit, So people think I'm wiser. I don't really know if I am or not, but
I don't like being called Mr. Cook. I'm the oldest at 69. I still get up at 4:30 in the morning and work out every morning. So I'm kind of at the end of the spectrum where I'm thinking I'm going to start saying I'm 50.
Yeah.
When I was young, starting in business, I was way ahead. Before I graduated from Purdue, I already had 3 businesses, and I would constantly have to fudge on my age for people to take me seriously. It doesn't happen anymore, but I do think I've earned a lot of stripes.
So as we do end, what was the, I'm going to ask this question. You've had a lot of businesses. What was probably like the, why in the heck did I do that business?
Before I got into health and wellness, I had 3 previous companies. One, I was the youngest person in Indiana ever to have a liquor license. I realized.
So did you have a liquor license before you could even drink liquor?
No.
Okay.
When I turned 21, I sat in front of the Alcoholic Beverage Commission, and they said, "Randy, why do you want to?" They believed me. Within a year, I said, "This is not what I thought it was. I don't want to do this." So another one was an ice cream company. I love ice cream, but no, don't want to do that. Another one, I started a line of convenience stores. I didn't want to do that either. So I got into health and wellness, and then things, which was where I really wanted to be from day one. And that's what I do today. It's all, life is about being well,
right,
comfortable, happy, spiritual. All of those things, it becomes the wellness continuum, which I taught in university for years. So I was president of Boys and Girls Club for years. I've done so many things, but it's all around people, and that's what our lives are about.
Where did you teach at then?
Concordia University, and then I did some of the smaller colleges as well. People get the wrong idea about what life is. And so once you start explaining it to them, just like insulation, it becomes a simple, stupid thing. Why do we make things so difficult? Keep it simple. Be truthful to yourself, first and foremost, and to everybody around you. Share the education, because that's how we all get better. Everybody has challenges, but if you understand the process and you treat everybody like you would want them to treat you, it makes life so much easier. So much easier. Happier, healthier. So here we are, working every day, not for ourselves.
Right.
We work for the clients we have, the men and women who work with us. It's their life too.
Absolutely.
And they need a purpose, a process, and a payoff. We all want to take care of our families. So I appreciate you asking me to come today. There's so much to everything, but it's so simple.
Right. Yeah, no, thank you very much for taking the time, Randy. I always appreciate you, because like, you're the installation guy that I have in the phone. Like, when somebody asks, I'm like, just call this guy. Like, sometimes I just hand it off as like, just call him directly. You know, sales guys are like, hey, what do we have going on here? So I appreciate you, sir. Have a great day. And if you guys have any more questions, reach out to Randy. He can educate you on that. Thank you, Randy.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.